spell. I did not give you permission to move, Malice screamed behind him. But Risen started to protest. Take him, Malice commanded her two youngest daughters, and Vienna and Maya rushed over and roughly grabbed Risen. Put him in a dungeon cell, Malice instructed them. Keep him alive. We will need him later. Vienna and Maya hauled the trembling male out of the anteroom. Risen did not dare offer any resistance. You have a plan, Shinena said to Malice. As Sinafe, the matron mother of House Hannet, the newest Doerden, had learned to see purpose in every action. She knew the duties of a matron mother well, and understood that Malice's outburst against Risen, who had in fact done nothing wrong, was more of calculated design than of true outrage. I agree with your assessment, Malice said to Breeze. Drizzt has gone beyond us. But by the words of Matron Bayenda herself, we must not fail, Breeze reminded her mother. Your seat on the ruling council must be strengthened at all cost. We shall not fail, Shinena said to Breeze, eyeing Malice all the while. Another wry look came across Malice's face as Shinena continued. In 10 years of battle against House Doerden, she said, I have come to understand the methods of Matron Malice. Your mother will find a way to catch Drizzt. She paused, noting her mother's widening smile. Or has she, perhaps, already found a way? We shall see, Malice. Her confidence growing in her former rival's decree of respect. We shall see. More than 200 commoners of House Doerden milled about the great chapel, excitedly exchanging rumors of the coming events. Commoners were rarely allowed in this sacred place, only on the high holidays of Loth or in communal prayer before a battle. Yet there were no expectations among them of any impending war, and this was no holy day on the Drow calendar. Demon Doerden, also anxious and excited, moved about the crowd, settling dark elves into the rows of seats encircling the raised central dais. Being only a male, Dean would not partake of the ceremony at the altar, and Matron Malice had told him nothing of her plans. From the instructions she had given him, though, Dean knew that the results of this day's events would prove critical to the future of his family. He was the chant leader. He would continually move throughout the assembly, leading the commoners in the appropriate verses to the Spider Queen. Dean had played this role often before, but this time Matron Malice had warned him that if a single voice called out incorrectly, Dean's life would be forfeit. Still another fact disturbed the elder boy of House Doerden. He was normally accompanied in his chapel duties by the other male noble of the house, Malice's present mate. Risen had not been seen since that day when the whole family had gathered in the anteroom. Dean suspected that Risen's reign as patron soon would come to a crashing end. It was no secret that Matron Malice had given previous mates to Loth. When all the commoners were seated, magical red lights began to glow softly all about the room. The illumination increased gradually, allowing the gathered dark elves to comfortably shift their dual-purpose eyes from the infrared spectrum into the realm of light. Misty vapors rolled out from under the seats, hugged the floor, and rose in curling wisps. Dean led the crowd in a low hum, the calling of Matron Malice. Malice appeared at the top of the room's domed ceiling, her arms outstretched, and the folds of her spider-emblazoned black robes whipping about in an enchanted breeze. She descended slowly, turning complete circles to survey the gathering, and to let them look upon the splendor that was their matron mother. When Malice alighted on the central dais, Breeza and Shinena appeared on the ceiling, floating down in similar fashion. They landed and took their places, Breeza at the cloth-covered case off to the side of the spider-shaped sacrificial table, and Shinena behind Matron Malice. Malice clapped her hands, and the humming stopped abruptly. 8 braziers lining the central dais roared to life, their flames' brightness less painful to the sensitive drow eyes in the red, mist-enshrouded glow. Enter, my daughters, Malice cried, and all heads turned to the chapel's main doors. Vienna and Maya came in, with Risen, sluggish and apparently drugged, supported between them, and a casket floating in the air behind them. Demon, among others, thought this an odd arrangement. He could assume, he supposed, that Risen was to be sacrificed, but he had never heard of a coffin being brought into the ceremony. The younger Doerden daughters moved up to the central dais and quickly strapped Risen down to the sacrificial table. Ximena intercepted the floating casket and guided it to a position off to the side opposite Risen. Call to the handmaiden, Malice cried, and Dinan immediately sent the gathering into the desired chant. The braziers roared higher. Malice and the other high priestesses prodded the crowd on with magically enhanced shouts of key words in the summoning. A sudden wind came up from nowhere, it seemed, and whipped the mist into a frenzied dance. The flames of all 8 braziers shot out in high lines over Malice and the others, joining in a furious burst above the center of the circular platform. The braziers puffed once in a unified explosion, throwing the last of their flames into the summoning, then burned low as the lines of fire rolled together in a gathered ball and became a singular pillar of flame. The commoners gasped, but continued their chanting as the pillar rolled through the colors of the spectrum, gradually cooling until the flames were no more. In their place stood a tentacled creature, taller than a drow elf and resembling a half-melted candle with elongated, drooping facial features. All the drow recognized the being, though few commoners had ever actually seen one before, except perhaps in illustrations in the clerical books. All in attendance knew well enough the importance of this gathering at that moment, for no drow could possibly miss the significance of the presence of a Yochlo, a personal handmaiden of Lolth. Greetings, handmaiden, Malice said loudly. Blessed is the Ermon and a Shesbenon for your presence. The Yochlo surveyed the gathering for a long while, surprised that House Doerden had issued such a summons. Matron was not in the favor of law. Only the high priestesses felt the telepathic question. Why dare you call to me? To right our wrongs, Malice cried out aloud, drawing the whole of the gathering into the tense moment. To regain the favor of your mistress, the favor that is the only purpose of our existence. Malice looked pointedly at Dinan, and he began the correct song, the highest song of praise to the Spider Queen. I am pleased by your display, Matron Malice, came the Yochlo's thoughts, this time directed solely at Malice. But you know that this gathering does nothing to aid you in your peril. This is but the beginning, Malice answered mentally, confident that the handmaiden could read her every thought. The matron took comfort in that knowledge, for she held faith that her desires to regain the favor of Lolth were sincere. My youngest son has wronged the Spider Queen. He must pay for his deeds. The other priestesses, excluded from the telepathic conversation, joined in a song to Lolth. Driz Doerden lives, the Yochlo reminded Malice, and he is not in your custody. That shall soon be corrected, Malice promised. What do you desire of me? Zincarla, Malice cried aloud. The Yochlo swayed backward, momentarily stunned by the boldness of the request. Malice held her ground, determined that her plan would not fail. Around her, the other priestesses held their breath, fully realizing that the moment of triumph or disaster was upon them all. It is our highest gift, came the Yochlo's thoughts. Given rarely, even to matrons in the favor of the Spider Queen. And you, who have not pleased Lolth, dare to ask for Zincarla? It is right and fitting, Malice replied. Then aloud, needing the support of her family, she cried, Let my youngest son learn the folly of his ways, and the power of the enemies he has made. Let my son witness the horrible glory of love revealed, so that he will fall to his knees and beg forgiveness. Malice reverted to telepathic communication. Only then shall the spirit wraith drive a sword into his heart. The Yochlow's eyes went blank as the creature fell into itself, seeking guidance from its home plane of existence. Many minutes, agonizing minutes to Matron Malice and all of the hushed gathering, passed before the Yochlow's thoughts came back. Have you the corpse? Malice signaled to the and Pierre, and they rushed over to the cave and removed the stone lid. Demon understood then that the box was not brought for a reason, but was already occupied. An animated corpse crawled out of it and staggered over to Malice's side. It was badly decomposed, and many of its pieces had rotted away altogether. But Demon and most of the others in the great chapel recognized it immediately. The legendary weapon. Zincarla? The Yochla asked. So that the weapon master you gave to the Spider Queen might be the lungs of your youngest son? It is appropriate, Malice replied. She sensed that the Yochla was pleased, as she had expected. Drizzt tutor had helped to inspire the blasphemous attitudes that had ruined Drizzt. Lolth, the Queen of Chaos, enjoyed ironies, and to have this same Zacna thing serve as executioner would inevitably please her. Zincarla requires great sacrifice, the Yochlow's demand. The creature looked over to the side where reason lay oblivious. The Yochlow seemed to frown, if such creatures could frown, at the sight of a pitiful sacrifice. The creature then turned back to Matron Malice and read her thoughts. Do continue, the Yochlow prompted. Very interesting. Malice lifted her arms, beginning yet another song to Lolth. She motioned to Shinaina, who walked to the case beside Briza and took out the ceremonial dagger, the most precious possession of House Do'Urden. Briza flinched when she saw her newest sister handle the item. Its hilt the body of a spider with 8 blade-like legs reaching down under it. For centuries, it had been Briza's place to drive the ceremonial dagger into the hearts of gifts to the Spider Queen. She never smirked at the other while she walked away, sensing Briza's anger. She joined Malice at the table beside Risen and moved the dagger out over the doomed patron's heart. Malice grabbed her hands to stop her. This time I must do it, Malice exclaimed to Shinaina. Shinaina looked over her shoulder to see Briza returning her smirk tenfold. Malice waited until the song had ended, and the gathering remained absolutely silent as Malice alone began the proper chant. Talkin' breast, dweeze breast. Ringing over the hilt of a deadly instrument. A moment later, Malice's chant neared completion, and the dagger went up high.
That's not so cool.
All the house tensed, awaiting the moment of ecstasy, the savage giving to the foul Spider Queen. The dagger came down, but Malice turned it abruptly to the side and drove it instead into the heart of Shinaina, Matron Sina Fe Harnett, her most hated rival. No, gasped Sina. Erupted in screams of shock and joy as Malice tore the dagger out from under Sina Fe Harnett and her enemy's heart along with it. Devious! Briza screamed above the tumult, for even she had not known Malice's plans. Once again, Briza was the eldest daughter of House Do'Urden, back in the position of honor that she so dearly craved. Devious! The Yochlow echoed in Malice's mind. Know that we are pleased. The animated fell limply to the floor. And understood. Put Zacnathane in the she instructed. They scrambled about, roughly displacing his Xenophae and getting Zacnathane in place. In motion, carefully lining up the large jars of unguents that had been painstakingly prepared for this moment. Matron Malice's reputation as the finest salve maker in the city would be put to the test in this effort. Malice looked at the yacht. Zin, Carla? She asked aloud. I have not regained the favor of love, came the telepathic reply, so powerfully that Malice was driven to her knees. Malice clutched at her head, thinking it would explode from the building pressure. Gradually, the pain eased away. But you have pleased the Spider Queen this day, Malice Do'Urden, the Yockler explained. And it is agreed that your plans for your sacrilegious son are appropriate. The honor is granted, but no final chance, Matron Malice Do'Urden. Your greatest fears cannot begin to approach the truth of the consequences of failure. The Yockler disappeared in an explosive fireball that rocked the chapel of
Hey, just chilling. How you doing?
Those gathered only rose to a higher frenzy at the bared deity and demon-led imagery in a song of praise to love.
You remember what? Just remember how my pipe was looking to where I was hitting it with the empty bowl and doing resin hits, right? Well, I just got done. Well, my brother got a hold of some rubbing alcohol today, and I was able to clean it. Hell yeah. But this is what it looks like after I cleaned it.
While Malice and her daughters worked over Zacnathane's corpse with magical salves and combinations of powerful spells. The animation of a corpse was a simple spell for a priestess, but Zincarla went far beyond that feat. Spirit Wraith, the undead result would be called. A zombie imbued with the skills of its former life and controlled by the mighty mother appointed by God. It was the most precious of Rolf's gifts.
Yeah.
And even more rarely
because all you do is, we got to use a piece of Tupperware that you're not going to use for anything else. But just put this in there, put some alcohol to where it covers, like, at least this part of it. That way it gets in there, let it sit. Or you can let it sit overnight, or you can let it sit for 2-3 hours and just rinse it out real good with hot water. And you gotta figure all that resin, so I can get a picture, had dropped down right here. So it's pretty much level with that.
Blingdenstone was different.
Now time to hit it.
When this Earth Neblin guard in through the immense stone and iron doors.
Do a hit of this, then we'll do a dab.
Unlike Menzo Baronzon, though on a lesser scale. His expectations could not have been further from the truth. While Menzo Baronzon sprawled in a single huge cavern, Blingdenstone was composed of a series of chambers interconnected by low tunnels. The largest cavern of the complex, just beyond the iron doors, was the first section Drizzt entered. The city guard was housed there, and the chamber had been shaped and designed solely for defense. Dozens of teeth and twice that number of smooth stones rose and fell, so that while
it always sucks when that pipe breaks.
He would possibly have to climb down several levels and up several
especially if you had it for a while. Like this one, I've had for a couple years now. And I think I feel like I should get it out.
An invading army bottled up for a painfully long time in the chamber's exposed sections. Scores of Zwerfnebli rushed about their posts to confirm the whispers that a drow elf had been brought in through the doors. They leered down at Drizzt from every perch, and he couldn't be certain if their expressions signified curiosity.
Here it is.
In this case, the Deepmen were certainly prepared against anything he might attempt. Every one of them clutched darts.
Here's my other one.
Crossbows, cocked and ready.
This one I got to soak too, because they'll look pretty much like this one.
Up as many stairs as they went down.
Because this is made by local glass blower around New Mexico by name of Brian Bentley. He made this one.
And the only way that Drizzt could keep
and then
was by watching the ceiling.
This one
was visible even from the lowest levels of the chamber. The drow smirked inwardly.
Was made by a fellow named Jason, which was he apprenticed glass blowing under Bentley. So that's why it's almost similar style. And what I like about these, the way they made them, pretty much.
Not nearly as long as the first one. This chamber too was tiered, though with far fewer levels.
There we go.
Dozens of entrances lined the walls to all sides, and fires burned in several areas. A rare sight in the Underdark, for fuel was not easily found. Blingdenstone was bright and warm by Underdark standards, but not uncomfortable in either case. Drizzt felt at ease, despite his obvious predicament, as he
and I'll show you guys how this one looks tomorrow after I clean it.
But did not linger, for the deep gnomes of Blingdenstone were an industrious lot, with hardly the time to stand idly and watch. Again, Drizzt was led down clearly defined roadways. These were not as twisting and difficult as the ones in the entrance cavern. Here the roads rolled out smoothly and straight, and all apparently led to a large, central stone building. The leader of the group escorting Drizzt rushed ahead to speak with two pick-wielding guards.
Well, that's what's weird, because this one would turn like that too. But when that one, when this one's clean, it pretty much has a similar look to this one.
Since they had entered the city, the Zwerfnebli rushed Drizzt through a series of bending corridors, ending in a circular chamber, no more than 8 feet in diameter, and with an uncomfortably low ceiling. The room was empty, except for a single stone chair. As soon as he was placed in this, Drizzt understood.
And it definitely hit pretty good.
Iron shackles,
especially when it's brand new.
And Drizzt was belted down tightly at every joint. The Zwerfnebli were not overly gentle, but when Drizzt flinched as the chain around his waist doubled up and pinched him, one of the deep gnomes quickly removed and reset him, firmly but smoothly. They left Drizzt alone in a dark and empty room. The stone door closed with a dull thud of finality, and Drizzt could hear not a sound from beyond. The hours passed. Drizzt flexed his muscles, seeking some give in the tight shackles. One hand wiggled.
Adding in here, I got probably
the pain of the iron biting into his wrist alerted him to his actions.
Not counting the two I showed you. I believe I got about 10 or 15 different hand pieces in here,
and forced them back under his rational control. Had the hunter gained that much of a place? Drizzt had come here willingly, and thus far the meeting had proceeded better than he had expected. This was not the time for desperate action, but was the hunter strong enough to overrule even Drizzt's rational decisions? Drizzt didn't find the time to answer those questions, for a second later, the stone door banged open, and a group of 7 elderly, judging from the extraordinary number of wrinkles crossing their faces, Zwerfnebli entered and fanned out around the stone chair. Drizzt recognized the apparent importance of this group, for where the guards had worn leather jacks set with mithril rings, these deep gnomes wore robes of fine material. They bustled about, inspecting Drizzt closely and chattering in their undecipherable tongue. One Zwerfneblin held up Drizzt's house emblem, which had been taken from his neck purse, and uttered, "Menzo Baronson?" Drizzt nodded as much as his iron collar would allow, eager to strike up some kind of communication with his captors. The deep gnomes had other intentions, however. They went back to their private, and now even more exciting, conversation. It went on for many minutes, and Drizzt could tell by the inflections of their voices that a couple of the Zwerfnebli were less than thrilled at having a dark elf prisoner from the city of their closest and most hated enemies. By the angry tone of their arguing, Drizzt almost expected one of them to turn at any moment and slice his throat. It didn't happen like that, of course. These gnomes were neither rash nor cruel creatures. One of the group did turn from the others and walk over to face Drizzt squarely. He asked, in halting but unmistakably drow language, "By the stones, dark elf, why have you come?" Drizzt did not know how to answer that simple question. How could he even begin to explain his years of loneliness in the Underdark?
That's the decision blue one that has an empty ball. At least the other one.
With his principles. "Friend," he replied simply, and then he shifted uncomfortably, thinking his response absurd and You came to us from Menzo Berenzon," he asked, his hawk-like nose crinkling as he uttered each word. "I did." Gaining confidence.
And that 10 or 15 that I got in here.
To extrapolate. I left Menzo.
The only reason I have him in here is because we don't really have room for him in the living room. And in the living room, I think all together, between me and my brother, most hated, we probably got easily 50, 60 pipes.
Of Drizzt's words. "I lived for many years in the city of the Drow," he replied quickly. "I am Drizzt Do'Urden, once the second boy of House Do'Urden." He took the emblem that Svirfneblin held, stamped with the insignia of his family, and tried to explain. "Dairmon and Ashesbernon." The deep gnome turned to his comrades, who began talking all at once. One of them nodded excitedly, apparently recognizing the Drow House name, which surprised him. The deep gnome who had been questioning Drizzt tapped his fingers over his
That was a rough one hitting that.
making annoying little smacking sounds while contemplating the interrogation's direction. "By all of our information, House Do'Urden survives," he remarked casually, noting Drizzt's reactions. When Drizzt did not immediately respond, the deep gnome snapped at him accusingly. "You are no rogue." How could this Svirfneblin know that? "I am a rogue by choice," he started to explain. "Ah, dark elf," the deep gnome replied again calmly. "You are here by choice. That much I can believe. But a rogue? By the stones, dark elf." The gnome's face contorted suddenly and fearfully. "You are a spy."
Hey, Hog Boss, how you doing, bro?
And
Just
relaxed into a
smoking a bowl out of my freshly cleaned
Was this Svirfneblin
pipe.
adept at such abrupt attitude changes, designed to keep a prisoner off guard? Or was such unpredictable?
How you doing, Hog Boss?
Race? Drizzt struggled with it for a moment, trying to remember his
Hell yeah,
previous encounter with deep gnomes. But
since you're here, let me put this down and let's do a dab.
Produced a familiar figurine. "Now tell me true, dark elf. Spare yourself much torment. What is this?" The deep gnome asked quietly. Drizzt felt his muscles twitching again. The hunter wanted to call to Guenevere, to bring the panther in so that it could tear these wrinkled old Svirfnebli apart. One of them might hold the keys to Drizzt's chains and be free. Drizzt shook the thoughts from his head and drove the hunter out of his mind. He knew the desperation of his situation and had known it.
And here's another one that I gotta clean.
If the Svirfnebli truly believed him a spy, they surely would execute him. Even if they were not certain of his intent, could they dare to keep him alive?
Well, I almost dropped that.
Come here, Drizzt whispered under his breath, realizing the dilemma he had placed upon himself and upon the deep gnomes. The hunter tried to get back into his thoughts. A single word and the panther would appear. No, Drizzt cried for the second time that day, dismissing that darker side of himself. The gnomes jumped back, fearing that the drow was casting a spell. A dart nicked into Drizzt's chest, releasing a puff of gas on impact.
I save it for emergencies. That's what I like about this tip, is it collects it down there. Along with how this one's made too. It'll collect it in that part.
When Drizzt's thoughts and vision had at last cleared, all was as it had been.
I have a little like container that I was heating this up and just pouring it out in, but I'm not sure what happened to it.
This time a bit more insistently.
But yeah, I'll smoke some reclaim, especially if I ain't got no wax and I have reclaim. I'll smoke some reclaim. I ain't gonna lie.
Should be more than a statuette adorning some unknown deep gnome's mantle. His name is Gwen.
Yeah, I like nectar collectors mainly because they make my wax last longer versus putting a little dab in your in a bucket of dab rig. With this, it you use less wax pretty much.
And sent him out of the room, not trusting the drow.
Oh, my glass spoons I use, or my glass hand pipes, should I say? I just soak them in like a little Tupperware bowl of rubbing alcohol.
He might have relinquished his single chance of escape.
Pretty much just use a little Tupperware bowl with a lid that you ain't gonna use for anything. Because once you use it for that, you kind of can't use it for anything else after that. But yeah, because that's how this one looked earlier today. Well, let me do a dab first before it gets too cold.
And when an individual drow fit that usual pattern, he could be dealt with efficiently and without remorse. But what did the deep gnomes do who showed a measure of the Zerf Nebula went back to their private ignoring Drizzt altogether. Then they left, with the exception of the one who could speak the dark elf tongue. What will you do? Drizzt dared to ask. Judgment is reserved for the king alone. He will rule on your fate in several days, perhaps.
Because this one, just earlier today, looked worse than this one.
The group you have met.
Just, well, let me demonstrate real quick.
I suspect, Dark Elf, that you will be executed. Resigned to the logic.
Empty bowl.
For his death. But I believe you are different, Dark Elf, the deep gnome went on. I suspect, as well, that I will recommend leniency, or at least mercy in the execution.
Empty bowl.
Quick shrug of his heavy-set shoulders.
Because kind of like how this one is. This one kind of dips. This one dips down a little bit more. But the reason it's that bad is because it has all this pretty much to fall down before it gets close to this part. So that's a lot of resin and junk buildup right there.
What is it? The Zerf Nebula asked, growing impatient. A deep gnome.
Right. But I just soak it in a.
Yes, he had to be. One of my people.
Like before I go to bed tonight, I'll put this in a little Tupperware bowl we got that has a lid on it. Put rubbing alcohol on it. Let it soak till I wake up in the morning. Or not so much. Well, I gotta wake up early anyways because I got dentist appointment. But I wake up the next day, take it out, rinse it with real hot water, real good, and it'll be looking like this tomorrow.
What was this survivor's name? The Zwerfneblin demanded angrily, his arms crossed tightly over his chest and his heavy boot tapping on the stone floor. I do not remember, Drizzt admitted. Why do you tell me this? The Zwerfneblin growled. I had thought you different from... He lost his hands in the battle, Drizzt went on stubbornly. Please, you must know of him. Belwa? The Zwerfneblin replied immediately. The name rekindled even more memories in Drizzt. Belwar Disengulp, Drizzt spouted. Then he is alive. He might remember. He will never forget that evil day, Dark.
Yeah, but what I like about it is I wish I had one for this one.
None in Blingdenstone will ever forget that evil day. Get him. Get Belwar Disengulp.
Good, watch it, see.
Pleaded. The deep gnome backed out of the room, shaking his head at the dark elf's continued surprises. The stone door slammed shut, leaving Drizzt alone to contemplate his mortality.
It just because it fits on there real tight and how old it is.
He dared
but see,
not hope.
This is...
Did you think that I would let you go away from me?
Has a little screen on it.
When Dinan entered the chapel,
and fits.
It was but a ploy to keep Sinafe Hanet's suspicions at ease. Thank you, matron.
Then it saves you from, like, especially with the new bow, like a professional cream bow in. You're taking that one last hit and it all goes down there. And sometimes
10 days of toil
you get Scooby snacks in the mouth, and sometimes it's a hot cherry. This stops it. They have different sizes. At least at the shop we worked at, they had different sizes. I think now all me and my brother have left is 3, because some of the pipes that we gave away to people that needed them or just as gifts had them on them. So all we have is like 3 left.
Handsome as you always were, my dear.
We've been trying to find these, and yeah, we haven't had much luck in them. But actually, I'll be right back. I'll go grab the other one I have that's slightly bigger.
This, he will go after Drizzt. Dinan dared to ask, though he fully understood that it was not his place to speak. Malice and the others were too absorbed by the spectacle of Zaknafein to punish the elder boy's oversight. Zaknafein will exact the punishment that your brother so deeply deserves, Malice promised, her eyes sparkling at the notion. But wait, Malice said coyly, looking from the spirit wraith to Risen. He is too pretty to inspire fear in my impudent son. The others exchanged confused glances, wondering if Malice was trying to placate Risen for the ordeal she had put him through.
See, it's a slightly bigger one.
Malice said to Risen. Take your blade and mark your dead rival's
I have one for this one, my brother has one for his.
And it will inspire terror in Drizzt when he looks upon his old mentor. Risen moved tentatively at first, then gained confidence as he closed on the spirit.
And I have this one. That's the last of the ones we have.
Not breathing or blinking, seemingly oblivious to the events around him. Risen put a hand to his sword, looking back to Malice one final time for confirmation. Malice nodded. With a snore, Risen brought his sword out of its sheath and thrust it exactly.
The guy that was doing the ordering for him at the shop,
quicker than the others could follow, the spirit wave exploded.
Can't remember the name.
2 swords came out and cut away, diving
it's
and
been a
crossing
minute.
with perfect precision. the sword went flying from Risen's hand, and before the doomed patron of House Do'Urden could even speak a word of protest, one of Zaknathane's swords crossed over his throat, and the other plunged deep into his heart. Risen was dead before he hit the floor, but the spirit wraith was not so quickly and cleanly finished with him. Zaknathane's weapons continued their assault, hacking and slicing into Risen a dozen times until Malice, satisfied with the display, called him off. "That one bores me," Malice explained to the disbelieving stares of her children. "I have another patron already selected from among the commoners." It was not, however, Risen's death.
Yeah, the only part that sucks is, it doesn't.
Malice's children. They cared nothing for any of the mates that their mother
Doesn't fit on like it should.
Always a temporary
That part
position.
needs to be a little
It
wider.
was the speed and skill of the spirit wraith that had stolen their breath. "As good as in life," Deanan remarked. "Better," Malice replied. "Zaknathane is all that he was as a warrior, and now that fighting skill holds his every thought. He will view no distractions from his chosen course. Look upon him, my children. Zinkarla, the gift of Loth." She turned to Deanan and smiled wickedly.
And it fits.
"I'll not approach."
That's why I was having to take it off the way I did.
Mother might desire a second
It's
display.
because when it fits on, it fits
Malice
on.
laughed at him.
Snug. That way
I
it's
have no cause to harm you.
airtight seal.
Deanan hardly relaxed at her words.
Yeah.
Malice needed no cause. The hack
It had that
body
little
of Risen
hole
showed
there,
that fact all
but there's
too
also
clearly.
a screen right there.
"You will lead the spirit wraith out," Malice said.
Good watch. Do it this way.
Deanan replied tentatively. "Into the region where you encountered your brother," Malice explained.
Oh, you can see on this one a little bit better.
Deanan
It needs to be
gasped.
clean, but
"Lead him out and leave him," Malice replied. "Zaknathane knows his prey. He has been
you see that
imbued with
screen right
spells
there.
to aid him in his hunt." Off to the side, Risa seemed concerned. "What is it?" Malice demanded of her, seeing her frown. "I do not question the spirit wraith's power, or the magic that you have placed upon it," Risa began tentatively, knowing that Malice would accept no discord regarding this all-important matter. "You still fear your youngest brother?" Malice asked her. Risa didn't know how to answer. "Allay your fears, as valid as you may think them," Malice said calmly. "All of you. Zaknathane is the gift of our queen. Nothing in all the Underdark will stop him." She looked at the undead monster. "You will not fail me, will you, my weapon master?" Zaknathane stood impassive, bloodied swords back in their scabbards, hands at his sides, and eyes unblinking. A statue he seemed, not breathing, unalive. But any who thought Zaknathane inanimate needed only to look at the spirit wraith's feet, to the mutilated lump of gore that had been the patron of House Do'Urden. Part 2. Belwar. Friendship. The word has come to mean many different things among the various races and cultures of both the Underdark and the surface of the realms. In Menzoberranzan, friendship is generally born out of mutual profit. While both parties are better off for the union, it remains secure. But loyalty is not a constant in our life, and as soon as a friend believes that he will gain more without the other, the union, and likely the other's life, will come to a swift end. I've had few friends in my life, and if I live 1,000 years, I suspect that this will remain true. There is little to lament in this fact, though, for those who have called me friend have been persons of great character, and have enriched my existence, given it worth. First there was Zaknathane, my father and mentor, who showed me that I was not alone, and that I was not incorrect in holding to my beliefs. Zaknathane saved me from both the violent and the chaotic fanatic religion that damns my people. Yet I was no less lost when a handless deep gnome came into my life, a Zwerfneblin that I had rescued from certain death many years before at my brother Dinan's merciless blade. My deed was repaid in full, for when the Zwerfneblin and I again met, this time in the clutches of his people, I would have been killed, and I would have preferred death, were it not for Belwar Disengulp. My time in Blingdenstone, the city of the deep gnomes, was such a short span in the measure of my years. I remember well Belwar's city and his
I'll be glad
and
after
I
tomorrow.
always shall. Theirs was the first society I came to know that was based on the strengths of community, not the paranoia of selfish individualism. Together,
Go to the dentist tomorrow and they
survive against the perils
pull
of
them
a
teeth
hostile
if they giving me
underdog,
problems.
labor in their endless toils
So at
of
least
mining
that
the
part
stone,
will be
and play games
a
that are hardly
relief.
distinguishable from every other aspect of their rich lives. Greater indeed are pleasures that are shared. Drizzt Do'Urden. Second, most honored Burrow Warden. Our thanks for your coming, most honored Burrow Warden, said one of the deep gnomes gathered outside the small room holding the drow prisoner. The entire group of Zwerfneblin elders bowed low at the Burrow Warden's approach. Belwar Disengulp flinched at the gracious greeting. He had never come to terms with the many laurels his people had mantled upon him since that disastrous day more than a decade before, when the drow elves had discovered his mining troop in the corridors east of Blingdenstone, near Menzo Baranzan. Horribly maimed and nearly dead from loss of blood, Belwar had limped back to Blingdenstone as the only survivor of the expedition. The gathered Zwerfnebli parted for Belwar, giving him a clear view of the room and the drow. To prisoners strapped in the chair, the circular chamber seemed solid, unremarkable stone, with no opening other than the heavy iron-bound door.
Hey, Bastion, how you doing, bro? Let's get a dab done since you're here, brother. And let's get this book back on. There we go.
The circular chamber seemed solid, unremarkable stone, with no opening other than the heavy iron-bound door.
I got my
My
other piece cleaned.
Covered by illusions of both sight and sound that allowed the
Sit that down.
captors to view the prisoner
Let's do a
at all
dab.
times. Belwar studied through it for several moments.
Hell yeah.
He is a drow, the Burrow Warden huffed in his resonant voice, sounding a bit perturbed. Belwar still could not understand why he had been summoned. Appearing as any other drow. A prisoner claims he saw you out in the Underdark, an ancient Zwerfneblin said to Belwar. His voice was
Yeah, then
very
tomorrow,
low, and he dropped his
well,
gaze to the floor as
we
he
could get soaked tonight, but tomorrow,
day of great loss.
this one will be clean.
Again at the mention of that day. How many times must he relive it? He may have, Belwar said with a non-committal shrug. Not much can I distinguish between the appearances of drow elves, and not much do I wish to try. Agreed, said Neil. They all look alike. As the deep gnome spoke, he turned his face to the side and faced them directly, but he could not see or hear anything beyond the illusion of stone. Perhaps you may remember his name. Another Zwerfneblin offered. The speaker paused, seeing Belwar's sudden interest in the drama. The circular chamber was lightless, and under such conditions, the eyes of a creature seen in the infrared spectrum shone freely. Normally, these eyes appeared as dots of red light, but that was not the case with Drizzt Do'Urden. Even in the infrared spectrum, this drow's eyes showed clear as lavender. Belwar remembered those eyes. Maga? Chimera. Belwar breathed. Drizzt, he mumbled in reply. Several of the Sverfneblin crashed. Belwar held up the handless stumps of his arms, one capped with the mithril head of a pickaxe, the other with that of a hammer. This priest, trying to explain. Responsible for my condition, he was.
No.
Some of the others murmured his doomed drow, thinking the Burrow Warden was angered by the memory. Then King Schnicktick's decision stands, one of them said. The drow is to be executed immediately. But this priest, he saved my life. Belwar is rejected. The others, turned on him. Never was it priest's decision that my hands be severed, the Burrow Warden went on. It was his offering that I be allowed to return to Blingdenstone. As an example, this priest said. But I understood even then that the words were uttered only to placate his cruel. The truth behind those words, I know, and that truth was mercy. An hour later, a single Sverfneblin counselor, the one who had spoken to Drizzt, came to the prison. It was the decision of the king that you be executed, the deep gnome said bluntly as he approached the stone chair. I understand, Drizzt replied as calmly as he could. I will offer no resistance to your verdict. Drizzt considered his shackles for a moment. Not that I could.
What pond?
Sverfneblin stopped and considered the
I think the only pretty much water that runs through is pretty much off the Pecos.
Meaning to expand on the events of the day, Drizzt completed his thought. I ask only one thing.
I'm not sure there's any like pond type around here. My brother, most hated, would know more about that.
You will find Guinevere to be a valued companion and a dear friend indeed. When I am no more, you must see to it that the panther is given to a deserving master. Belwar Disencote, perhaps. Promise me this, good gnome, I beg. Sverfneblin shook his hairless head, not to deny Drizzt's plea, but in simple disbelief. The king, with much remorse, simply could not allow the risks of keeping you alive, he said somberly. The deep gnome's wide mouth turned up in a smile as he quickly added, but the situation has changed. Drizzt cocked his head, hardly daring to hope. The Burrow Warden remembers you, Dark Elf, the Sverfneblin proclaimed. Most honored Burrow Warden Belwar Disencote has spoken for you and will accept the responsibility of keeping you. Then I am not to die? Not unless you bring death upon yourself. Drizzt could barely utter the words. And I am to be allowed to live among your people in Blingdenstone? That is yet to be determined, replied the Sverfneblin. Belwar Disencote has spoken for you, and that is a very great thing. You will go to live with him. Whether the situation will be continued or expanded. He let it hang at that, giving an unanswering shrug. Following his release, the walk through the caverns of Blingdenstone was truly an exercise in hope for the beleaguered drow. Drizzt saw every sight in the deep gnome city as a contrast to Menzoberranzan. The Dark Elves had worked the great cavern of their city into shaped artwork undeniably beautiful. The deep gnome city too was beautiful, but its features remained the natural traits of the stone, where the drow had taken their cavern as their own, cutting it to their designs and tastes. The Sverfnebli had fitted themselves into the native designs of their complex. Menzoberranzan held a vastness, with a ceiling up beyond sight that Blingdenstone could not approach. The drow city was a series of individual family castles, each a closed fortress and a house unto itself. In the deep gnome city was a general sense of home, as if the entire complex within the mammoth stone and metal doors was a singular structure, a community shelter from the ever-present dangers of the Underdark. The angles of the Sverfneblin city, too, were different. Like the features of a diminutive race, Blindenstone's buttresses and tiers were rounded, smooth, and gracefully curving. Conversely, Menzoberranzon was an angular place, as sharp as the point of a stalactite, a place of alleyways and leering terraces. Drizzt considered the two cities distinctive of the races they housed, sharp and soft like the features and the hearts, Drizzt dared to imagine, of their respective inhabitants. Tucked away in a remote corner of one of the outer chambers sat Belwar's dwelling, a tiny structure of stone built around the opening of an even smaller cave. Unlike most of the open-faced Svirfneblin dwellings, Belwar's house had a front door. One of the 5 guards escorting Drizzt tapped on the door with the butt of his mace. "Greetings, most honored Borough Warden," he called. "By orders of King Schnicktick, we have delivered the drow." Drizzt took note of the respectful tone of the guard's voice. He had feared for Belwar on that day a decade and more ago, and had wondered if Dinan's cutting off the Deep Gnome's hands wasn't more cruel than simply killing the unfortunate creature. Cripples did not fare well in the savage Underdark. The stone door swung open, and Belwar greeted his guests. Immediately his gaze locked with Drizzt's in a look they had shared 10 years before, when they had last parted. Drizzt saw a somberness in the Borough Warden's eyes, but the stout pride remained, if a bit diminished. Drizzt did not want to look upon his Svirfnebli's disfigurement. Too many unpleasant memories were tied up in that long-ago deed. But inevitably, the drow's gaze dropped, down Belwar's barrel-like torso to the ends of his arms, which hung by his side. Far from his fears, Drizzt's eyes widened in wonderment when he looked upon Belwar's hands. On the right side, wondrously fitted to cap the stub of his arm, was the blocked head of a hammer, brushed with mithril and etched with intricate, fabulous runes and carvings of an earth elemental and some other creatures that Drizzt did not know. Belwar's left appendage was no less spectacular. There the Deep Gnome wielded a 2-headed pickaxe, also of mithril, and equally crafted in runes and carvings, most notably a dragon taking flight across the flat surface of the instrument's wider end. Drizzt could sense the magic in Belwar's hands, and he realized that many others Svirfnebli, both artisans and magic users, had played a part in perfecting the items.
"Useful,"
Belwar remarked, after allowing Drizzt to study his mithril hands for a few moments. "Beautiful," Drizzt whispered in reply, and he was thinking of more than the hammer and pick. The hands themselves were indeed marvelous, but the implications of their crafting seemed even more so to Drizzt. If a dark elf, particularly a drow male, had crawled back into Menzoberranzon in such a disfigured state, he would have been rejected and put out by his family to wander about as a helpless rogue until some slave or other drow finally put an end to his misery. There was no room for apparent weakness in the drow culture. Here, obviously, the Svirfnebli had accepted Belwar and had cared for him in the best way they knew how. Drizzt politely returned his stare to the Borough Warden's eyes. "You remembered me," he said. "I had feared—"
"Later we shall talk, Drizzt Do'Urden,"
Belwar interrupted. Using the Svirfneblin tongue, which Drizzt did not know, the Borough Warden said to the guards,
"If your business is completed, then take your leave."
"We are at your command, most honored Borough Warden,"
one of the guards replied. Drizzt noticed Belwar's slight shudder at the mention of the title.
"The king has sent us as escorts and guards to remain by your side until the truth of this drow is revealed."
"Be gone, then,"
Belwar replied, his booming voice rising in obvious ire. He looked directly at Drizzt as he finished.
"I know the truth of this one already. I am in no danger."
"Your pardon,
"You are excused,"
Belwar said abruptly, seeing that the guard meant to argue.
"Be gone. I have spoken for this one. He is in my hair, and I fear him not at all."
The Svirfneblin guards bowed low and slowly moved away. Belwar took Drizzt inside the door, then turned him back to slyly point out that 2 of the guards had taken up cautious positions beside nearby structures.
Too much do they worry for my health,
He remarked dryly in the drow tongue. You should be grateful for such care, Drizzt replied.
I am not ungrateful.
Belwar shot back, an angry flush coming to his face. Drizzt read the truth behind those words. Belwar was not ungrateful, that much was correct. But the Burrow Warden did not believe that he deserved such attention. Drizzt kept his suspicions private, not wanting to further embarrass the proud Zerfneblin. The inside of Belwar's house was sparsely furnished with a stone table and single stool, several shelves of pots and jugs, and a fire pit with an iron cooking grate. Beyond the rough-hewn entrance to the back room, the room within the small cave, was the deep-known sleeping quarters, empty except for a hammock strung from wall to wall. Another hammock, newly acquired for Drizzt, lay in a heap on the floor, and a leather, mithril-ringed jack hung on the back wall, with a pile of sacks and pouches underneath it.
In the entry room we shall string it,
Belwar said, pointing with his hammer hand to the second hammock. Drizzt moved to get the item, but Belwar caught him with his pick hand and spun him about.
Later, the Zerfneblin explained. First you must tell me why you have come.
He studied Drizzt's battered clothing and scuffed and dirty face.
Be right
It was
back.
obvious that the drow had been out in the wild for some time.
And tell me too, you must, where you have come from.
Drizzt flopped down on the stone floor and put his back against the wall. I came because I had nowhere else to go, he answered honestly.
How long have you been out of your city, Drizzt Do'Urden?
Belwar asked him softly. Even in quieter tones, the solid, deep gnome's voice rang out with the clarity of a finely tuned bell. Drizzt marveled at its emotive range, and how it could convey sincere compassion or inspire fear with subtle changes of volume. Drizzt shrugged and let his head roll back so that his gaze was raised to the ceiling. His mind already looked down a road to his past. Years. I have lost count of the time. He looked back to the Zerfneblin. Time has little meaning in the open passages of the Underdark. From Drizzt's ragged appearance, Belwar could not doubt the truth of his words. But the deep gnome was surprised nonetheless. He moved over to the table in the center of the room and took a seat on a stool. Belwar had witnessed Drizzt in battle, had once seen the drow defeat an earth elemental, no easy feat. But if Drizzt was indeed speaking the truth, if he had survived alone out in the wilds of his Underdark for years,
Hell yeah, bro.
Burrow
Definitely
Warden's
appreciate it.
respect for him would be even more considerate.
Of your adventures you must tell me, Drizzt Do'Urden.
Belwar grunted.
I wish to know everything about you, so that I may better understand your purpose in coming to a city of your racial enemies.
Drizzt paused for a long time, wondering where and how to begin. He trusted Belwar. What other choice did he have? But he wasn't sure if the Zerfneblin would begin to understand the dilemma that had forced him out of the security of Menzoberranzan. Could Belwar, living in a community of such obvious friendship and cooperation, understand the tragedy that was Menzoberranzan? Drizzt doubted him. But again, what choice did he have? Drizzt quietly recounted to Belwar the story of the last decade of his life, of the impending war between House Do'Urden and House Hamnet, of his meeting with Massard and Alton when he acquired Guinevere, of the sacrifice of Zaknathane, Drizzt's mentor, father, and friend, and of his subsequent decision to forsake his kin and their evil deity, Lolth. Belwar realized that Drizzt was talking about the dark goddess the deep gnomes called Lolth, but he calmly let the regionalism pass. If Belwar had any suspicions at all, not really knowing Drizzt's true intent on that day when they had
I don't
met
know.
many years before,
It
the Burrow Warden
looks
soon came to
interesting.
believe that his guesses about this was accurate.
wondering if
as
the
Drizzt
story,
told of
since
life in the Underdark,
it's
of his
it looks like it
encounters
should
with
be like a
Basilisk
Bonnie and
and the
Clyde
battle
deal,
with his brother and sister.
if the story mode might not be
Before Drizzt even
co-op,
mentioned his reason for
that would
seeking
be
the
pretty
Swift
cool
Moon,
if they did that.
the agony of his loneliness, and
But
the
the
fear
trailer
of
looked
losing
pretty
his very
crazy.
identity and the savagery necessary to survive in the wilds.
Most hated
Belwar had
showed me
guessed it
that
When
a
Drizzt
couple
came
days
to the
ago, I
final
think.
days of his life outside of Bleedingstone, he picked his words carefully.
But I thought it was pretty cool. What do you
Drizzt
think
had not
about
yet
it?
come to terms with his feelings and fears of who he truly was, and he was not yet ready to divulge his thoughts, however much he trusted his new companion. The Burrow Warden sat silently, just looking at Drizzt when the drow had finished his tale. Belwar understood the pain of the recounting. He did not prod for more information or ask for details of personal anguish that Drizzt did not openly share. Maga, Camera, the deep gnome whispered soberly. Drizzt cocked his head. By the stones, Belwar explained. Maga, Camera. By the stones indeed, Drizzt agreed. A long and uncomfortable silence ensued. A fine tale it is, Belwar said quietly. He patted Drizzt once on the shoulder, then walked into the cave room to retrieve the spare hammock. Before Drizzt even rose to assist,
Right.
Belwar had set the hammock in place between hooks on the walls.
It definitely did look like it had
Sleep
a
in
lot
peace.
going on.
Drizzt Do'Urden.
Belwar said as he turned to retire.
No enemies have you here. No monsters lurk beyond the sound of my door.
Then Belwar was gone into the other room, and Drizzt was left alone in the undecipherable swirl of his thoughts and emotions. He remained uncomfortable.
I don't know
Sure,
if I'm going to want to play when it first comes out, because imagine how busy the servers are going to be for when it actually comes out.
Drizzt looked out Belwar's open door at the daily routines of the Zwerfneblin city.
If you're able to crash servers from like a lot of people being on them, I see that actually happening on that day. Just because how much people have been looking forward to it coming out finally.
Nor had he any expectations of
So
getting
that
his
means that's
full
gonna be
outfit
a
or his
hell
weapons
of a
and
lot
armor
of
back
people
anytime
going
soon.
online,
Drizzt
and them
accepted the
servers are
story,
ain't gonna
figuring
know
he
what to do.
and Guinevere were better off now than they had been in many years, and confident that
So I don't know.
Zwerfnebli would
If
not
I get the
harm
game, I
Sturgeon
might just
or any of his other
play
possessions.
around and take my time on the story mode before I try it online, just
Belwar had gone
just
out
in case.
one of the rare occasions
I know them servers are gonna be,
left his house.
yeah, it's gonna be
Despite
hell.
the fact that the deep gnome and Drizzt rarely conversed, Belwar was not the type who spoke simply for the sake of hearing his own voice. Drizzt found that he missed the Burrow Warden. Their friendship had grown, even if the substance of their conversations had not.
I would
A
imagine
group of young Zwerfnebli walked past and shouted a few quick words.
it's because how popular that brand is.
Many times before,
That place probably
particularly
stays
in the first
busy.
days after Drizzt had entered the city. On those previous occasions,
It wouldn't
Drizzt had
surprise
been
me
left
if
wondering
they
if he had been greeted or
ran out
insulted.
of product a
This
lot,
time,
just because
Drizzt understood the basic friendly meaning.
hey, it's a bigger city and
Belwar had taken the
it's a
time
popular
to instruct
brand.
him in the basics of the Zwerfneblin tongue. The Burrow Warden returned hours later to find
Cause
Drizzt
cookies ain't
sitting
too
on a
bad.
stone stool, watching the world slip past.
Tell me, Dark Elf,
The deep gnome asked in his hearty, melodic voice.
what do you see when you look upon us? Are we so foreign to your ways?
I see hope, Drizzt replied, and I see despair.
Oh damn, bro, that sucks.
He knew that the Zwerfneblin society was better suited to the Drow's principles, but watching the bustle of Blingdenstone from afar could only evoke painful memories in his new friend.
Too bad you can't call in orders and have it
Schmidt and I
delivered.
met this day.
Now that would be cool.
I tell you in truth that he is very interested in you. Curious would seem a better word, Drizzt replied.
But only you're able to do like an order online and all that, and be able to get in front of everyone and pick your order up and then bounce.
Surrendering to Drizzt's blunt honesty.
Curious, then, as you wish. You must know that you are not as we have come to regard drow elves. I beg that you take no offense.
None, Drizzt answered honestly. You and your people have given me more than I dared hope. If I had been killed that first day in the city, I would have accepted the fate without placing blame on the Zvirfnebli. Belwar followed Drizzt's gaze out across the cabin to the group of gathered youngsters.
You should go among them,
Belwar offered. Drizzt looked at him surprised. In all the time he had spent in Belwar's house, the Zvirfneblin had never suggested such a thing. Drizzt had assumed that he was to remain the Burrow Warden's guest, and that Belwar had been made personally responsible for curtailing his movements. Belwar nodded toward the door, silently reiterating his suggestion. Drizzt looked out again. Across the cavern, the group of young Zvirfnebli, a dozen or so, had begun a contest of heaving rather large stones at an effigy of a basilisk, a life-sized likeness built of stones and old suits of armor. Zvirfnebli were highly skilled in the magical crafts of illusion, and one such illusionist had placed minor enchantments upon the likeness to smooth out the rough spots and make the effigy appear even more lifelike.
Dark Elf, you must go out sometime,
Belwar reasoned.
How long will you find my home's blank walls fulfilling? They suit you,
Drizzt retorted, a bit more sharply than he had intended. Belwar nodded and slowly turned about to survey the room.
So they do,
He said.
Hell yeah, Bessie.
Drizzt could clearly see.
What's that one on?
Belwar turned back to the
Bessie?
drow. His
I had to look for that one.
held an unmistakably resigned expression.
Maga Camera, Dark Elf. Let that be your lesson.
Why? Drizzt asked him. Why does Belwar disenchant, the most honored Burrow? Belwar flinched again at the title. Remain within the shadows of his own door. Belwar's jaw
On Netflix.
and his dark
My
eyes
brother's got Netflix. I have to
Go
try
out.
to find that tomorrow.
said in a resonating growl.
Young you are, Dark Elf, and all the world is before you. Old I am. My day is long past.
Not so old. Drizzt started to argue, determined this time to press the Burrow Warden into revealing what it was that troubled him so. But Belwar simply turned and walked silently into his cave room, pulling close behind him the blanket he had strung up as a door. Drizzt shook his head and banged his fist into his palm in frustration. Belwar had done so much for him, first by saving him from the Zvirfneblin king's judgment, then by befriending him over the last few 10 days and teaching him the Zvirfneblin tongue and the Deep Gnome's ways. Drizzt had been unable to return,
Hell yeah.
though he clearly saw that Belwar carried some great burden. Drizzt wanted to rush through the blanket now, go to the Burrow Warden and make him speak his gloomy thoughts. Drizzt would not yet be so bold with his new friend, however. He would find the key to the Burrow Warden's pain in time, he found. But right now, he had his own dilemma to overcome. Belwar had given him permission to go out into Blingdenstone. Drizzt looked back to the group across the cavern. 3 of them stood perfectly still before the effigy, as if turned to stone. Curious, Drizzt moved to the doorway, and then, before he realized what he was doing, he was outside and approaching the young Deep Gnomes. The game ended as the drow neared, the Zvirfnebli being more interested in meeting the dark elf they had rumored about for so many 10 days. They rushed over to Drizzt and surrounded him, whispering curiously. Drizzt felt his muscles tense involuntarily as the Zvirfnebli moved all about him. The primal instincts of the hunter sensed a vulnerability that could not be tolerated. Drizzt fought hard to sublimate his alter ego, silently but firmly reminding himself that the Zvirfnebli were not his enemies.
Greetings, drow friend of Belwar Disengulp, one of the youngsters offered. I am Seldig, fledgling and pledgeling, and to be an expedition miner in but 3 years hence. It took Drizzt a long moment to sort out the deep gnome's rapid speech patterns. He did understand the significance of Seldig's future occupation, though, for Belwar had told him that expedition miners, those Svirfnebli who went out into the Underdark in search of precious minerals and gems, were among the highest-ranking deep gnomes in all the city.
Greetings, Seldig, Drizzt answered at length. I am Drizzt Do'Urden.
Not really knowing what he should do next, Drizzt crossed his arms over his chest. To the Dark Elves, this was a gesture of peace, though Drizzt was not certain if the motion was universally accepted throughout the Underdark. The Svirfnebli looked around at each other, returned the gesture, then smiled in unison at the sound of Drizzt's relieved sigh.
You have been in the Underdark, so it is said,
Seldig went on, motioning for Drizzt to follow him back to the area of their game.
For many years,
Drizzt replied, falling into step beside the young Svirfnebli. The hunting ego within the drow grew ill at ease at the following deep gnome's proximity, but Drizzt was in full control of his reflexive paranoia. When the group reached the fabricated basilisk's side, Seldig sat on the stone and bid Drizzt to give him a tale or two of his adventures. Drizzt hesitated, doubting that his command of the Svirfneblin tongue would be sufficient for such a task, but Seldig and the others pressed him. At length, Drizzt nodded and stood. He spent a moment in thought, trying to remember some tale that might interest the youngsters. His gaze unconsciously roamed the cavern, searching for some clue. It fell upon, and locked upon, the illusion-heightened basilisk effigy.
Basilisk,
Seldig explained. I know, Drizzt replied. I have met such a creature. He turned casually back to the group, and was startled by its appearance. Seldig and every one of his companions had rocked forward, their mouths hanging open in a mixture of expressed intrigue, terror, and delight.
Dark Elf, you have seen a basilisk?
One of them asked incredulously.
A real, living basilisk?
Drizzt smiled as he came to decipher their amazement. The Svirfnebli, unlike the Dark Elves, sheltered the younger members of their community. Though these deep gnomes were probably as old as Drizzt, they had rarely, if ever, been out of Lindenstone. By their age, drow elves would have spent years patrolling the corridors beyond Menzo Baranzan. Drizzt's recognition of the basilisk would not have been so unbelievable to the deep gnomes then, though the formidable monsters were rare even in the Underdark.
You said that basilisks were not real,
one of the Svirfnebli shouted to another, and he pushed him hard on the shoulder. Never I did, the other protested, returning the shove. My uncle saw one once, offered another.
Scrapings in the stone was all your uncle saw,
Seldig laughed.
They were the tracks of a basilisk by his own proclamation.
Drizzt's smile widened. Basilisks were magical creatures, more common on other planes of existence. Wild drow, particularly the high priestesses, often opened gates to other planes. These monsters obviously were beyond the norm of Svirfnebli. Few were the deep gnomes who ever looked upon a basilisk. Drizzt chuckled aloud. Fewer still, no doubt, were the deep gnomes who were keen to tell that they had seen one.
If your uncle followed the trail and found the monster,
Seldig continued,
he would sit to this day as a pile of stone in a passageway. I say to you now that rocks do not tell such tales.
The berated deep gnome looked around for some rebuttal.
Drizzt Do'Urden has seen one,
he protested.
He is not so much a pile of stone.
All eyes turned back to Drizzt.
Have you really seen one, Dark Elf?
Seldig asked.
Answer only in truth, I beg.
One, Drizzt replied.
And you escaped from it before it could return the gaze?
Seldig asked. A question many others Svirfnebli considered rhetorical. Escaped? Drizzt echoed the gnomish word, unsure of its meaning.
Escape, run away,
Seldig explained. He looked to one of the others, Svirfneblin, who promptly feigned a look of sheer horror, then stumbled and
Be
scrambled
right back,
frantically
everyone.
a few steps away. The other deep gnomes applauded the performance, and Drizzt joined in their laughter. You ran from the basilisk before it could return your gaze, Celtic reasoned. Drizzt shrugged, a bit embarrassed, and Celtic guessed that he was withholding something. You did not run away? I could not escape, Drizzt explained. The basilisk had invaded my home, and it killed many of my Rothe. Homes, he paused, searching for the correct Svirfneblin word. Sanctuaries, he explained at length, are not commonplace in the wilds of the Underdark. Once found and secured, they must be defended at all costs. You fought it? Came an anonymous cry from the rear of the Svirfneblin group. With stones from afar? Asked Celtic. That is the accepted method. Drizzt looked over at the pile of boulders the gnomes had been hurling at the effigy, then considered his own slender frame. My arms could not even lift such stones, he laughed. Then how? Asked Celtic. You must tell us. Drizzt now had his story. He paused for a few moments, collecting his thoughts. He realized that his limited skills with his new language would not allow him to weave much of an intricate tale, so he decided to illustrate his words. He found 2 poles that the Svirfnebli had been carrying, explained them as scimitars, then examined the effigy's construction to ensure that it would hold his weight. The young deep gnomes huddled around anxiously as Drizzt set up the situation, detailing his darkness spell, actually placing one just beyond the basilisk's head, and the positioning of Gwenevere, his feline companion. The Svirfnebli sat on their hands and leaned forward, gasping at every word. The effigy seemed to come alive in their minds, a lumbering monster, with Drizzt, this stranger to their world, lurking in the shadows behind him. The drama played out, and the time came for Drizzt to enact his movements in the battle. He heard the Svirfnebli gasp in unison as he sprang lightly onto the basilisk's back, carefully picking his steps up toward the thing's head. Drizzt became caught up in their excitement, and this only heightened his memories. It all became so real. The deep gnomes moved in close, anticipating a dazzling display of swordsmanship from this remarkable drow who had come to them from the wilds of the Underdark. Then something terrible happened. One moment he was Drizzt the showman, entertaining his new friends with a tale of courage and weaponry. The next moment, as the drow lifted one of his pole props to strike at the phony monster, he was Drizzt no longer. The hunter stood atop the basilisk, just as he had that day back in the tunnels outside the moss-filled cave. Poles jabbed at the monster's eyes, poles slammed viciously into the stone head. The Svirfnebli backed away, some in fear, others in simple caution. The hunter pounded away, and the stone chipped and cracked. The slab that served as the creature's head broke away and fell, the dark elf tumbling behind. The hunter went down in a precise roll, came back to his feet, and charged right back in, slamming away furiously with his poles. The wooden weapon snapped apart, and Drizzt's hands bled, but he, the hunter, would not yield. Strong, deep gnome hands grabbed the drow by the arms, trying to calm him. The hunter spun on his newest adversaries. They were stronger than he, and 2 held him tightly, but a few deft twists had the Svirfnebli off balance. The hunter kicked at their knees and dropped to his own, turning about as he fell and launching the 2 Svirfnebli into headlong rolls. The hunter was up at once, broken scimitars at the ready as a single foe moved in at him. Belwar showed no fear, held his arms defensively out wide.
Drizzt,
He called over and over.
Drizzt O'Erden.
The hunter eyed the Svirfnebli's hammer and pick, and the sight of the mithril hands invoked soothing memories. Suddenly, he was Drizzt again. Stunned and ashamed, he dropped the poles and eyed his scraped hands. Belwar caught the drow as he swung, hoisted him up in his arms, and carried him back to his hammock. Troubled dreams invaded Drizzt's soul.
Memories of the Underdark and of that other, darker self that he could not escape. How can I explain? He asked Belwater when the Burrow Warden found him sitting on the edge of the stone table later that night. He could possibly offer an apology.
None is needed.
Belwater said to him. You do not understand. He was wondering how he could possibly make the Burrow Warden comprehend the depth of what had come over him.
Many years you have lived out in the Underdark,
Belwater said.
surviving where others could not.
But have I survived? Belwater's hand patted the drower's shoulder gently, and the Burrow Warden sat down on the table beside him. There they remained throughout the night. Drizzt said no more, and Belwater didn't press him. The Burrow Warden knew his role that night. A silent support. Neither knew how many hours had passed when Seldic's voice came in from beyond the door. Come, Drizzt Do'Urden, the young deep gnome called. Come and tell us more tales of the Underdark. Drizzt looked at Belwater curiously, wondering if the request was part of some devious trick or ironic joke. Belwater smiled despairingly.
I got Canada, Dark Elf. They'll not let you hide.
Send them away, Drizzt insisted.
So willing are you to surrender?
Belwater retorted, a distinct edge to his normally round, firm voice.
You who have survived the trials of the wilds?
Too dangerous, Drizzt explained desperately, searching for the words.
I cannot control, cannot be rid of. Go with them, Dark Elf,
Belwater said.
They will be more cautious this time. This beast.
Alright, we'll call it the end of his life for tonight. See if I can lay down and get a little bit of rest before I gotta get some teeth pulled tomorrow. But I want to thank everyone who stopped by, everyone who keeps stopping by, showing me your support. I definitely appreciate all y'all's support. Until next time, everyone, y'all stay safe out there.